Figurative cloud looming over the White House. The president is infuriated, according to a source familiar with the president's thinking, infuriated over leaks to the Washington Post, which is reporting that the president's briefing materials for his call with Russian President Vladimir Putin included an all-caps warning, "Do not congratulate Putin on his election victory," despite the president opening the call with just that, and then telling a room full of reporters with the cameras on that he had done that. The news breaking of the president defying, ignoring, maybe not even reading the advice of his national security aides sent the president fuming. And according to this source, it's only reinforced to President Trump his belief that there are people inside his administration who are actively working to undermine him. This is a point we heard from Republican Senator Marco Rubio today. Rubio wasn't supportive of the president's congratulatory call, but
I don't like what he did, but I really hate that there's someone in his inner circle that's willing to leak this stuff. And if you don't like working for the president, you should resign your job.
Now, to be clear, we don't know the source of the leak. The Washington Post story is attributed to, quote, officials familiar with the call. For all we know, and this is hypothetical, senior Republicans on Capitol Hill, upset about the news of the congratulatory call to Putin, phoned the White House for an explanation, and were given that information confidentially, and they're the ones who leaked it. We simply don't know where it came from, but the president is not being unreasonable in wanting those working for him to not share something so sensitive. The leak is a legitimate reason for the chief executive to be upset. But one also might imagine that whoever leaked this perhaps might also be upset, whether he or she was upset because the president didn't read the briefing materials, or because he didn't heed them, or because of the larger issue that President Trump to this day has said nastier things publicly about me, Don Lemon, Chuck Todd, Meryl Streep, and the cast of Hamilton than he has of former KGB operative and current human rights repressor Vladimir Putin. And while it is true that Russia hawks point to the records of both of President Trump's immediate predecessors, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and see much to criticize when it comes to not sufficiently standing up to Putin for invading other countries, suppressing human rights, repressing his own people, and much worse, we are also now in a moment where Putin is bolder than ever before. According to the U.S. intelligence community, Russia is interfering in the elections of Western democracies all over the world, including, again, right here in the United States. And Putin's opponents, well, they have a way of finding themselves in jail or in the morgue. The Washington Post also reporting that President Trump chose to not heed talking points from his national security aides, instructing him in his phone call with Putin to condemn the recent poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter on British soil, a poisoning for which both the UK and US governments have blamed Russia. So, by all means, be outraged by the leaking and the inability of a president to fully trust his team. But also ask yourself, when it comes to this story, when it comes to Russian behavior and US-Russian relations and Russian cyber attacks against the American people and the inability of the millions of Russian people to have free and fair elections, or the attempted murder of a Putin critic on British soil, is the leaking really the most offensive thing going on here? The president may be privately seething over the leak, but just moments ago he publicly defended what we know about that phone call, tweeting, quote, "I called President Putin of Russia to congratulate him on his election victory." In past, Obama called him also. "The fake news media is crazed because they wanted me to excoriate him. They are wrong. Getting along with Russia and others is a good thing, not a bad thing." He goes on to say in another tweet, "They can help solve problems with North Korea, Syria, Ukraine, ISIS, Iran, and even the coming arms race. Bush tried to get along but didn't have the smarts," Trump tweeted. "Obama and Clinton tried but didn't have the energy or chemistry. Remember, reset. Peace through strength," he wrote in all caps. CNN's Jeff Zeleny has more for us from the White House.
On a cold and snowy day outside the White House, inside the heat is on. President Trump fired up and infuriated over yet another leak, this time about his call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. After the president said this Tuesday,
"I had a call with President Putin and congratulated him on the victory, his electoral victory."
It stirred outrage. Republicans and Democrats wondering once again why the president didn't take a heavier hand with Putin, scolding him for Russian election meddling or the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain.
I haven't heard anybody over in the legislative branch say they thought that was a great idea.
And this is like congratulating Saddam Hussein when he got 98% of the vote in the Iraqi elections.
But it turns out the president didn't follow the script from his national security advisors, who wrote in all capital letters, "Do not congratulate," in his Putin briefing papers. A Washington Post report about the president ignoring that advice sparked recriminations today in the West Wing. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly launching an investigation, specifically targeting anyone from the national security team who may be trying to undermine the president. One senior White House official telling CNN, someone leaked the president's briefing papers. Leaking such information is a fireable offense and likely illegal. Another official said, this is unacceptable. With the federal government closed for the unseasonal spring snowstorm, the White House canceled the president's public schedule. But that didn't stop him from lashing out once again at the Russia probe. As the president gets closer to deciding whether to sit down with special counsel Robert Mueller, he tried again today to discredit the investigation. In a tweet filled with misspellings, he quoted lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who wrote, "I think President Trump was right when he said there never should have been a special counsel appointed because there was no probable cause for believing that there was any crime, collusion, or otherwise, or obstruction of justice." On Capitol Hill, Republicans have roundly rejected the president's criticism of the special counsel.
I don't agree with that. My advice to the president from the beginning has been that he should have no comment whatsoever on Mr. Mueller's investigation until